is the CanMar Morning Talk Show, a fresh take on what's happening in the cannabis and psychedelic spaces. I'm your host, Melissa Jane Saidi. Join me as I sit down and have thought-provoking conversations with some of the industry's top experts and trendsetters from around the globe. Welcome to another captivating episode of the CanMar Morning Talk Show. Today, I'm thrilled to have a true industry trailblazer joining me, Jamie Pearson. Jamie is an extraordinary entrepreneur and visionary, leaving an indelible mark on the cannabis landscape. With an unwavering passion for the plant and a wealth of expertise in the industry, Jamie has become a recognized leader, pushing boundaries and challenging conventions. Today, we have the privilege of delving into Jamie's journey, uncovering the secrets to her success, and gaining valuable insights into the ever-changing cannabis landscape. Join us as we embark on a thought-provoking conversation exploring the challenges, triumphs, and future prospects of this dynamic industry. Jamie, welcome to the CanMar Morning Talk Show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Looking forward to chatting with you. How are you doing today? How's the week been? It's a Friday, so I hope you've had a good week so far.
I'm great. I'm looking forward to the long weekend.
Yeah, amazing. I'm sure. Do you have any big plans for the long weekend?
I'm going to do a home improvement project.
Very productive. I like that.
Yeah, on Memorial Day.
That's awesome. So Jamie, I usually like to start off the show by asking my guests to tell us a little bit about themselves, their backstories. I'm sure most people already know quite a lot about your backstory. I know you have a lot of interesting stories to tell from the inception of how you got into this industry. So maybe you can just share a little bit about how you got into the industry and how you've evolved over the years in the industry with the CanMar audience today.
Sure. When I'm out on the speaking circuit, I always talk about the roots and the suits. Now, that's not a term that I coined by any stretch, but I love it. And I think that it really typifies kind of how the industry looks at the moment. And there is some tension between, the people that were risking their life and liberty for access to the plant, the people that were hiding from helicopters in, the Emerald Triangle, that were smuggling across the Canadian border, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the roots. And what I will tell you is my dad is one of them. He's been growing cannabis for 56 years. My whole life. I grew up with a dad who didn't drink alcohol, but did 2 tours in Vietnam, and cannabis made him feel better. So cannabis was a part of my life, but I also was a high school, college athlete. I played basketball on a USA feeder team. Like, basketball was my whole life. And I really kind of looked down my nose at people who did drugs and saw my dad in that light. Which is interesting, in another part of my story. But then, I also, on my mom's side, DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill is my first cousin. And so when I was in law school, he lit a joint on Saturday Night Live. And, whether or not I wanted to be in cannabis, it was there. It was part of my life. And I never thought I would be part of it. Right before Muggs asked me to help Cypress find a weed deal, I was actually a real estate investor, and Muggs and I invested in real estate together. But I spent 25 years buying houses. I did a lot of flipping, but I didn't flip for profit. I flipped into my rental portfolio and have most of my portfolio to this day. And, I look like a genius now because I'm from Montana. I live in Billings, Montana. To this day, I was born and raised in Montana. And our real estate market has gone bananas thanks to both COVID and the TV show Yellowstone. So anyway, I had the luxury when I found the deal that we ended up doing with Cypress, which we did the deal with Bang. So Bang asked me to step in and run the Cypress partnership that we had developed. And that was really when I first got quasi in the industry. At that point, Muggs and I had owned a farm in Sebastopol up in Sonoma County in Northern California. We had dabbled with the concept of farming and learned pretty quickly that there's a lot to that. That was a really valuable experience for us. We sold the farm when that first set of fires came through. And, we developed a brand. and I worked with the Cypress deal with Bang. Well, then when Bang asked me to come on, I came on as the director of operations. A couple years later, they made me the COO. A couple years after that, they went public. And a couple months after they went public, the CEO and founder stepped down, and the board asked me to step in as the interim president and CEO, which I did, thinking that I was just going to be there for a few months while the board found my replacement. But the board asked me if I would stay on permanently. And that's kind of, that was 5 years ago. And at that point, I had already been at Bang 5 years. So, I've been in the industry a long, long time. It goes by so fast. But that's my story.
It's incredible. And in a way, with what your dad was doing and with mugs, and there was no way that you weren't going to get involved in the industry in some way. I think it was kind of destined to be, right?
I think so, but I do consider myself a suit in that roots and suits concept, because I came in as a straight up businesswoman. I'm college educated. I went to law school. I have a master's degree. I was not running from helicopters. I don't have a favorite strain. Like I will say this though, that my first few months officially at Bang, I took over their customer service, answering those emails that came through. And it was really eye-opening, because there were a lot of people that were writing us saying, "Oh my God, your product changed my life. My wife has had migraines, debilitating migraines her whole life. She had her first good night's sleep." These really things that give me goosebumps to this day to think about. And I got my paradigm shifted from this person that looked down my nose at cannabis to going, wow, all of this stigma is a lie, and this plant is so beneficial. And I personally experienced that as a business person in the industry, when truthfully, when I first got into the industry and I had left the real estate industry to, really work with Bang and Cypress, I was kind of looking for a change. I'd been doing the investing thing for 25 years and kind of had grown bored of it. And this was kind of fun and exciting. And I met all kinds of cool people. But more importantly, I learned that we have all been lied to, and that this is a real industry, and it is disrupting alcohol, tobacco, big pharma. And that's why everybody's so scared of it. And so all of a sudden, I sort of became an activist, I would say, in the sense that I stopped caring what people think. I stopped caring about the stigma about how it would impact me. And I started realizing that eliminating the stigma was important for humanity. And now it is my mission is to help as many people as I can really understand that cannabis isn't the poison that alcohol is, that it's plant medicine, that we have an endocannabinoid system, that it helps people feel good. Can it be abused? Certainly, like anything else, people abuse exercise. I might be a workaholic. Who knows? But if you love what you do, is it really work? Anyway, that's a joke. But you can abuse anything. But I do think that we have to really look at cannabis as an alternative to opiates and poison and the other things that we don't blink an eye. I was just at a party and a whole bunch of people were like, well, let's go outside and smoke a joint. And they didn't want the kids to see them, but they all had a drink in their hand. And the hypocrisy of that just speaks to the stigma, where you're going to alter your brain in front of your child, but you won't smoke a joint in front of your child, because it's not okay. And all of that is starting to become, started to become clear to me about 10 years ago, when I realized, oh, maybe my dad was the smart one who said, yeah, I don't like the way alcohol makes me feel, but I like the way cannabis makes me feel. And, I never had a raging father who would get shit-faced drunk and punch holes in the walls, And then fast forward, as a landlord for 25 years, when somebody would come up to me and they would smell like cannabis, I'd be like, oh, good, it's a stoner. Because I knew that the stoners paid their bills and went to work and took care of business and didn't get in, drunken raging fights and didn't get DUIs and all the stuff, because I would notice that if I had a applicant that had credit problems, and I asked him, oh, I got a DUI. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this one's dicey. And so just an observational perspective from that as a businesswoman, all of that fed into me understanding that we need to do something about the stigma. So
that's a fantastic point, and I think you really hit the nail on the head, because people are very easy to just overlook having a drink, as you said, in front of your kids. Easy to pop some prescription pills for depression or anxiety, but they are very quick to turn their nose up at cannabis, and the stigma is still very real. Obviously we're doing everything we can to kind of move away from that, but I think education is a really important point that we need to kind of take more cognizance of, especially in this industry. And it's difficult to do because of the stigma. For example, our CanMar Instagram account got deactivated recently, and we are not selling any products. We're not touching, completely educational, and we got shut down. And when you and I were having kind of our pre-chat the other day, you were talking about exposing your kids to different things, and I'm curious to hear, being in this industry and educating your kids on this, and the benefits of cannabis and trying to remove that stigma. How does that kind of look for you, Jamie?
Well, in the beginning, when I got into the industry, my kids know about grandpa and they knew about mugs. So, my kids had been exposed to cannabis, early on, and I had already, said to them, it's not a big deal. We have a funny story in our family about going into my parents' house one day, and we walked through the garage, and it was harvest time and it smelled pretty strong, and my daughter had a friend with her, and she's like, oh, my Grammy must have hit another skunk. And her friend said, that's not a skunk. It's kind of like when she found out there was no Santa Claus, we were like, okay, the jig is up. But I think with my kids, a few things, and I'm one of those weirdos that raised my kids without television. But I was an English teacher in a former life. I taught middle school English, and I just really value reading as a habit. And I think part of that's just the reading is an active thing that you do with your brain. Your eye physically covers the page, your brain has to interpret the messages, where watching television is super passive. And I wanted my kids to train their brains to go to other places through their eye brain connection, because I've done a lot of research in my master's degree on that, and knew that it was super important. I also knew that the left right brain hemisphere connection super important for math intelligence, and that the best way to increase that for kids is playing a string instrument, whether it's the piano or the violin, where the right and the left hand have to do something different. So of course my kids had no say in the matter. They both played a string instrument. I let them pick which one, but they had to play one. And so they both played the cello. And these are the things I'm talking about. But most important was travel. So we traveled, my kids are dual citizens of the US and Germany. Their dad's German. And so, they spent every single summer in Europe and in Germany with their family. And, we took them out of school in America, put them in school in Germany when they were in kindergarten and first grade, for a year, because we knew that, from my experience, that, language acquisition is easiest when you're young, before your palate hardens. And while your brain is still in language acquisition mode. So we put the kids in school that year, and, they learned German, because I didn't want them to have a relationship with their other side of the family through a translator. So they've been exposed to different cultures. And then when they were in 6th and 7th grade, we took them out of school for a year, and we went around the world, and we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. And we, went all through Europe and Morocco. And, my daughter just got done backpacking through South America for 6 months. Like, now they are just citizens of the world. And that's really what I wanted for them. They know how to ride motorcycles. They know how to drive a stick shift. They both of my kids speak German, Spanish, and English. They know how to shoot guns. What I wanted for them is that in any, circumstance, if they were thrown into a situation, they could figure it out. And, you know, the gun thing, I'm not a gun fan, but when I was flipping houses in Montana, oftentimes we would buy homes and they would be completely furnished, like people would get up and leave and the house would just go. Well, we would often find guns. And if the kids were helping us muck the house out and they came across a gun, I wanted them to know what to do with it. So, you know, those are the kind of things where I just felt like deep diving and not trying to protect them from, oh, I need to make sure they never touch a gun. No, I want them to learn the languages, you know, how to ride a motorcycle, all those things. So that's what I mean. I just think then they become confident citizens, and I just wish more people would be focused on education rather than protection, because I don't think that helps our kids at all.
That is a fantastic point. And, you know, I think that we're seeing what you said about protection. You know, I think a lot of people are scared nowadays. You know, they don't want to expose their kids to all of these kind of things, but that's the best way to get a well-rounded kind of education. And I must say my parents were very much like that with my sister and I as well. You know, expose us to things. If you want to learn about something, learn about something, because that's the way that you broaden your mind, right? 100%.
I think yesterday our governor, who's not my favorite, signed a bill to ban transgender people from reading books in schools. I'm like, you really don't have anything better to do? Because is this really a problem? I mean, I just, it's honestly, it's I can't even form words. It's so embarrassing.
Is, you know, and there's so many bigger problems that we're facing with globally, you know, poverty, you know, people are homeless. It's just, there's so many bigger
water. Hello, you know, the environment, water, basic, affordable housing. Anyway, I could go on for days. Cannabis reform, getting people out of prison who are there for a plant, while we have companies making billions of dollars. It has to, I can't even, my heart breaks for these people that are sitting in prison. They're in a cage because they possessed a plant. It's, you know, it's definitely, it's wrong.
And it makes absolutely no sense. And I know that that's something that you're a big advocate for example, the Last Prisoner Project. Do you have any advice for people who maybe want to get more involved in kind of advocating for this? Because I think it's a big problem. I don't think people are talking about it enough. So anything that you could add there?
There's a couple of things. Like every Friday I get this newsletter called the Beard Bros Sesh. So if you don't know the Beard Bros, they're amazing. You should look them up. They've got a website, and they're advocates for the plant, and they write this newsletter every Friday, but where they basically recap, you know, all the journalistic endeavors. You know, they're pulling, you know, kind of consolidating the news of that week. But today's sesh, they talk about a woman who also, like Last Prisoner Project, is organizing people to write letters and send money to the people in prison and like help them have a more humane experience if there is such a thing in prison. There's so many ways to get involved, but I think the most important thing is to like lobby your legislators and let them know that this is not okay with you. And then I think writing letters. The other organization I'm really tied into is the Happy Monkey, and monkey spelled Munkey. That's a group out of New York. They're very influential. The Happy Monkey group are really good friends of mine. I've been friends with them for about 5 years. Vlad Bautista and I are really tight, and they have a thing on their website about prisoners that they can sign or write letters to with addresses and everything that you need, just letting those prisoners know that they're not forgotten. And then also if you can put money on their books or figure out which prisoner is, you know, close to getting out, and then helping apply political pressure, there's a lot that can be done.
I think that's really, really amazing. And I think, you know, it's all about making a noise, you know, and the more noise we make,
it really helps
for people to.
It helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree. So yes, everyone, let's make a noise on that.
Yes.
Yes. Just to go back a little bit to your days at Bang, of course, as you mentioned before, you spent quite a while there. You've done a lot while you were there. And you've done some really incredible things, which I could list on for days and days. But I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the moments or experiences that really stand out for you? Some of maybe the wins that you experienced personally while at your time with Bang.
There's so many. It was really an incredible experience, and I'm really grateful to Scott Van Rixel and Richard Sellers, who founded the company and brought me in. I always say, you know, how many 50-year-old women get the opportunity to pivot in their career and learn how to run a public company? That was an incredible experience. So grateful for it. I think a couple things. There were a few really special people that, you know, I crossed paths with along the way, too numerous to mention, but I would say the contacts that I made, my Rolodex is pretty amazing. And part of that was that, you know, Bang was one of the very first brands that was recognizable because Scott had done such a great job. He's a master chocolatier. He developed an amazing product. He really made sure that the product was high quality, that the experience was consistent, and people recognized that. And then the branding was professional, and it had a nutritional fact panel on it. So it really, between Mugs and Bang, doors opened for me because nobody knew who I was. And that really gave me an entree into the industry that, you know, I recognized nothing about me probably had anything to do with it. It was really the fact that I was representing this amazing brand and, you know, and connected to probably the ultimate still alive cannabis band in the game. You know, those guys are they're legends. And, you know, so I just was in the right place at the right time, super, super lucky. And I think when I go back to my real estate career, I had a mentor in real estate that taught me that you get back tenfold what you give. And I really think that changed my life, because then when I did that in real estate and I learned how that works, I learned how to give more than I received. And then what happened in cannabis, I think, is when people would come to me and say, oh, I need this, or I need a person who does that. And if I ran across that person, I'd be like, oh, you just need to talk to this person. And I kind of became known as being a connector of people. And that kind of became an animal that fed itself. So when I tell you I have this like amazing Rolodex, like I think about it, I'm like, I really kind of know most of the people who have been influential or have access to them or one phone call away from them. And part of that's because I didn't have my hand out and I didn't require, oh, well, I'll give you this if you give me that. There was no quid pro quo. I just give. And it's come back to me tenfold. It's been, you know, pretty amazing. So I think the whole experience at Bang was just good for me as an entree. And I'll tell you the one specific thing that I think about that just happened is I have a girlfriend in the industry, Dr. Shonda Macias, whom I admire, I adore. I mean, she blows my mind. She is so smart and so kind. And she called me about a project she was working on that was a brand that she was acquiring. And I realized it was my knowledge from Bang where I was able to analyze, oh, well, that lab test is 8 months old and you're going to need to find out whether you can have that product relab tested, or does it have to be, you know, remade or destroyed? Like, there are all of these things that I learned. I also learned how to take a brand across state lines, that there's different packaging rules and different milligram rules and different rules. Like, can the CBD be hemp derived, or does it have to be cannabis derived and grown in that state? And all the states have all these little nuanced different rules. And it all matters because you don't want to produce a product and get to the finish line and have ordered 100,000 packages because you're trying to benefit from the economy of scale and then find out, oops, we made this big. You have to preemptively solve all of the potential problems requires knowing what they all could be. And having done that for 7, 8, 9 years, I guess, man, goes by fast. I would say that I've got a leg up on most people that are working in brands, because I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, got a, more. We all have a million t-shirts on every event, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I really like what you said about, you get what you give. And I truly believe in that philosophy. If what we put out is what we get back. If we're going to be negative or walk around with our hands out, that's what we're going to get back. We're not going to get anything back. So I truly believe in that philosophy, and I really love that. And yeah, as you said, there's so many intricacies and nuances that I think people often, they come into the industry and they think, oh, well, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to do this. But especially if you're dealing on a global scale, as you know, there are so many intricacies and so many boxes that need to be checked, right?
And sometimes I will tell you that, people come into the industry like a perfect example is people come in from alcohol. And it really depends on the person, but some people come in from alcohol and that alcohol experience is beneficial because they have kind of a roadmap of how it can look. But the ones that come in and they're like, oh, look, I'm a big deal because I was in alcohol and I know everything about distribution. I know everything about whatever. I'm always just waiting for the day that they crash and burn, because cannabis and alcohol are not the same. The industries are not the same. Our industry was built on the back of secrecy, of relationships, and people would lose their life or their liberty if you ratted them out, or if you squealed, or if you told the wrong person. And there's still this really endemic relationship-based concept in cannabis. So the people who don't do people well don't survive, and the people that don't believe they have anything to learn don't survive. And so it's always interesting. Vlad and I were talking about this the other day, where we have a mutual friend that's very much, I know everything, I'm the best, I'm the biggest, I'm the baddest. And it's like there's a lot to learn, and a lot to learn by being humble. And so I always try to check myself. I've learned a lot, but it's also, this is the other piece of the industry that is hard for people to grasp when they're new to it. It changes so fast that, I think about the time at Bang when we were in about 2,500 stores in California, and California went rec. And overnight, only 300 stores were licensed. And a lot of brands made the decision, well, fuck it, we're just going to keep, we're going to keep selling to all of our stores. But you can't. We couldn't. We were public. So we immediately went from a really robust distribution to a pretty anemic distribution. We were, from 2,500 to 300 stores, made a huge impact on our revenue. But we were not willing to deal out the back door, so to speak. And then you're put in this conundrum where you have all of these illicit shops that are selling illicit products that are not tested, that are not taxed, that could be making people sick. I think by and large, the majority of the operators out there that are running illicit shops are doing a pretty good job. And then the other conundrum is, so what? We should imprison these people? And then it's that catch-22. Do you, where I understand the people that spent the money and jumped through the hoops to be legal are really put in a tough spot because they want the illicit stuff to stop. But do you want to make those illicit people criminals who were in an enterprise doing something legal, the people that were in the gray area of Prop 215? The law changed overnight and they didn't have a spare $1 million to go get the license. So there's just some difficulties that, things can change on a dime, and, you kind of have to be able to parallel process and be ready to pivot at any moment. And I think that the people who are flexible and who have figured out how to make quick decisions and make quick changes, those are the ones that survive. And the ones that don't follow the something shiny syndrome, Richard Sellers and I talk about there's a lot of opportunity in the industry, and it's easy to get sidetracked. I really feel like you got to do what you're good at and stick to that, and kind of, know what's going on in the industry, but don't get sucked into 15 million different directions and try to do too much.
Fantastic point, and I think that's the thing that, there are a lot of kind of disparities and inconsistencies, and as you said, things change so quickly. So you have to really stay on your toes, that is for sure. And what you said about constantly learning, I think is also very important. My friend actually sent me a quote the other day. I think it was Frank Sinatra, and it said, "If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room." And I think that's really true.
Exactly.
So Jamie, I'd love to talk a little bit more about your new venture, the New Holland Group, your consulting firm. Tell me a little bit about this, how this all came to be, and what it is that you guys are doing.
So when I left Bang, both my kids were graduating from college. My son took a gap year, so they're a year apart. So they both ended up graduating at the same time from 2 different colleges. And I really wanted to take them on a trip. So we went to Croatia and Budapest and had this like fantastic time. But I didn't have a plan for when I left Bang. I just knew that, running a micro cap public company, it was really hard work. It was time for me to leave. I had some difficulties with the private equity company that was in control of Bang when I took over. We just didn't see eye to eye on what the future of the company should be. So my time was up, and it was a great experience while I was there. It ran its course. And while the news was spreading through the industry that I had left Bang, people were calling me and saying, "Hey, well, now that you don't have anything to do, would you come here and help me with my brand? Would you come here and help me do this? I've got this project and you're perfect for it." And, I was taking all of this in and kind of overwhelmed by the response, because I just thought I would like life would move on and people would forget I existed. I really expected that to happen.
Not happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen quite like I expected. So all of these opportunities were coming my way, which I loved because it was an opportunity for me to continue helping people. And then I, talked to Richard, whom I consider one of my mentors, and I've got a couple of other mentors in the industry. And I'm part of this group that we kind of jokingly refer to as the female mafia. And it's a bunch of women CEOs in cannabis, and you'll know every single one of their names. And we're a bunch, we get together once a month and just process things that we're all going through together, which is so great. And so I went to my cohort of women and talked to them about it. And, New Holland Group was born of me taking in all the data of there's all this opportunity to help people. There's a need. I have what it takes to probably save people from making some expensive mistakes. And so yeah, it looked like time for me to, at least as a side hustle, start this consulting gig. Well, I no sooner developed my logo and my brand story and style guide, and did all the things that I know how to do when you're developing a brand, and decided very purposefully not to put a website out in the world. And I figured, if people want to find me and if they need to find me, they'll find me. I'm not out there really promoting Jamie or New Holland Group, but I still have more business than you can imagine. And now I have the luxury of picking and choosing what I want to do every day and who I get to work with, or whom I get to work with, I should say. And so that's kind of how New Holland Group was born. The other piece of that story is that having my children be German and my ex-husband German, I read, write, and speak fluent German. And I met my husband while I was attending the University of Wuppertal, learning German. So that was in 1997. I've been speaking German for a long time. And it was natural for me to want to bring Bang into Europe, because it gave me an opportunity to, see my family over there and work on the industry in the European environment that I was so comfortable in. And so I was able to do that. And so I, signed some deals for Bang where we brought our CBD division into Europe. And so we had distribution in 9 European countries. I did a lot of speaking in Europe. I did some speaking in German, and kind of became, a known entity over there, and Bang became known over there through those efforts. So there was a lot of interest when Germany announced they were going rec. There was a lot of interest in having me help brands that were interested in expanding into Europe. And just, the Swiss pilot program was going on, the Dutch pilot program was going on, Malta had legalized. I had my thumb on the pulse of what was happening in Europe, and, knew all the big players. So that was kind of a natural direction for the consulting firm to go. And then also my experience just bringing brands across state lines. So that's kind of the 2 main areas of focus, are helping brands cross state lines and helping brands and companies enter the European landscape. So that's, what New Holland is. The people that hire me, we're all like-minded, I would say. I work with people who think the world is abundant, who want to help other people, and I've got an amazing roster of clients.
I love that. I really love that. And there are a few points, that you mentioned that I would like to touch on. And the first is certainly the female mafia, which I absolutely love. That's very, very cool. And this is something I always like to ask the female guests, the women that I have on the show, about your experience as a woman in cannabis, because it is slightly different for us as women in the industry. So I'd love to hear, a little bit about your experiences as a woman, and I'm sure there are many. If you could share some things that have stood out for you being a woman in the space.
Sure. There's so much that I could say on that topic. The first thing I want to say, though, is, having been a basketball player at the college level, specifically, to get to that level, you got to be pretty good. I got good, I would say, because I played a lot of pickup basketball with men, and I wasn't afraid to go step out onto a court and say, I got next. And there was this constant process of having to prove yourself. And then once they realized, oh, she actually can hang with us, she can play, then getting to the point where they were like, we want her because she plays good defense. She sees the court, I could throw a good alley-oop, things like that. I grew to be really comfortable being the only woman in a group of men. And so that served me well, definitely being a female leader. I was often at Bang the only woman in the room. And that was never uncomfortable for me, because I grew up sort of being the only woman on the court. So I would say that, for me, that might be a little bit different than, someone else who maybe didn't have that experience. The other thing I'll say is, at the end of the day, I was hiring, firing, managing cash, doing all the things that men had to do. So I wasn't a woman leader, I was just a leader. And while I bristle sometimes when people are like, female CEO, at the same time, I also do acknowledge that that's an attempt to really speak to the fact that it isn't as easy. Women get something like 2 cents on every dollar of capital that's out in the world. And, it isn't easy being a woman. And sometimes, people are talking to my boobs, or they're hitting on me, or they're putting their hand on my, the small of my back, or taking liberties that I know don't get taken with men. And then there's also that just sort of eye roll of, oh, she's going to play that card again, but there are men in the world who witness it, who see it, who understand, that it does happen, and who don't want that for their daughters and their wives and their sisters. So it's getting better, but we've got a long way to go. And, one of the things that I'm known for is a speech that I gave back in 2019, when I was named one of the most influential women in cannabis by High Times. They asked me to give the keynote speech at their banquet. And I thought a long time about what is the message that I want to give to the world. Like, it was an opportunity to speak to 2,500 people. And I knew that it was also going to go, through High Times, probably out to a lot more than those, just the people in that room. And the message that I think I wanted people to understand is that nobody gets where they're at by themselves. The world's abundant, but it's our job to share access to people who don't look like us, think like us, talk like us. That means you have to get out of your comfort zone and go find people to give access to, because the only way the world's going to get better is if we do that on purpose. Because I think human nature is that you always look at your circle and you say, oh, Dave's son just graduated from my alma mater. Dave lives in my same town. We went to the same high school. We went to the same college. Our kids grew up together. I'm comfortable with Dave and his family. I'm going to tap that person. And why would I go outside of my race, outside of my gender, outside of my comfort zone to do something unknown? Because unknown is scary, but that's where the magic happens. And that was the message that I gave at that banquet, because that's what I really believe. And that's what I do. That's, what I realize is, everybody uses cannabis. This is one of the big aha moments that I had running Bang, was that, why was every single person in our, lifestyle photos, a blonde hair, blue-eyed California person, when the statistics were telling me that the people who used our product were young and old, male and female, fat and skinny, all races, all sexualities. Like, Bang had users from all walks of life, but we were only representing one walk of life. The air quote around attractive. And I'm like, there are attractive people who are fat and skinny, black and brown, and every other shade in between. And I made a mandate to our advertising agency at the time and said, do not bring me another ad campaign with a bunch of white people, because that isn't speaking to our brand. Actually, we need to speak to the people who are buying our products. And that's not the only people buying our products. And so that's, where I realized I had to start going outside of my comfort zone, and find people who didn't look like me, to say, how do I speak to this population? What does our marketing need to look like? Because, I'm not an expert outside of my little bubble. I grew up in Montana. What do I know about being any of those things that aren't me? But I realized it was really important for me as a leader to do that for my brand, because that was going to give our brand a leg up. We needed to be talking to our consumer. And it's amazing to me when I had that aha moment, that other brands don't get that. It's shocking to me, frankly. But anyway, that's one of the things I'm known for.
And that is so true. And I think that's something that I have seen as well, just even doing this podcast, that so many different types of people from different walks of life, different countries, different backgrounds, but everyone has this personal story with cannabis. And this is something that I think makes the industry very unique and special, is that this is something that brings people from all walks of life together. And, I can speak from my own little bubble. I'm living in a small little town, city in South Africa, and even cannabis has just opened my world and opened my mind view so much. So I really think that's something that is super special about this industry. And you say step out of your comfort zone, of course, and I think that's a great piece of advice to women who want to enter the industry, right? Is there any other kind of advice that you have for women, or actually anyone who wants to kind of enter the space?
I get asked this question a lot. One of the things that, going back to the roots and suits conversation, the roots automatically assume the suits are there for a cash grab, and the suits automatically assume that the roots need help learning how to run a business. And I think the lesson in that is that nobody should be making assumptions. Like, there needs to be really that humble open-mindedness that I was talking about, because the suits that are here now, we're still in prohibition, and they're giving up these cushy jobs. Like I met a guy that has a personal story from cannabis, who gave up a job as a senior VP at Pepsi. And I know people that worked at Kellogg's, and I know people that worked, all over Hallmark, and, amazing positions. They have to have a little edge to them, or have to be willing to take a risk and have some courage to leave a cushy corporate non-cannabis job to come into cannabis. So the roots need to give those people credit. I say that frequently. However, the suits also need to understand that if you've run a business in a clandestine manner, or from prison, or what I've witnessed myself personally, the people that operate these businesses know more about running business. They may not use your acronyms, KPIs, or whatever you want to call it, but they have those things. And they know how to run a business. So don't make the assumption that they don't. There's a lot that we can learn from one another if we're open-minded and respectful. And so that would be the first thing I would assume. I would say is, don't make assumptions when you walk into a room. Don't assume that everybody in that room uses cannabis, or people who don't for various reasons. Don't. And by the way, there are people in your job at Pepsi or Hallmark who are stoned every day, and you just don't know it. So, the assumption thing just really needs to be thrown out the window. I think the second thing is, to go for it, because it is an exciting industry. There is a lot of opportunity, but never assume that you know more than the people, because, oh, well, I know how to make a social media channel blow up. Maybe, but not in cannabis. You don't. Everything's different. Please don't name your company anything with Canna, Green, or Mary Jane. You won't be able to get a bank account. There's just some basic things, advice that I give. And I think really just go for it, and have fun. Because if you can't have fun in the cannabis industry, you're doing something wrong.
That's for sure. That is for sure. And I think that's really good advice. I think don't come into this industry kind of with any preconceived notions, because they'll all go out the window the minute you start to learn things. That's totally been my experience. And it's fun, exciting, and there's a lot of, you have to be willing to learn and grow and change with the industry, I think. So I think that's really great advice. And as I mentioned before, there were a few other things I wanted to touch on what you said early on, and let's jump into the Germany side of things. You speak fluent German, you went to college there, your ex-husband is German, your kids are dual citizens, so you really have your finger on the pulse of that market. So, and of course, we're in the lead up now to ICBC Berlin, which is coming up next month. Very exciting. I was very fortunate enough to attend last year when you were the keynote speaker. I absolutely loved every minute. And I'd like to dive a little bit into what your thoughts are on the current state of the German market, a little bit about ICBC and what you're looking forward to this year. Let's dive into that a little bit. So let's start with Germany. First of all, what are your thoughts on what's happening in the market there?
Well, it's really exciting. For those of us who've been involved in the German market for a long time, we're seeing this buzz building, and I expect that this is going to be I'm certain of it, that this ICBC will be the biggest one ever, just by virtue of the way the emails are coming in of people saying, hey, can you hook me up? Can you help me? So because I think I've spoken at darn near every single ICBC there's been, because I have that international worldview, and it was always an excuse to get on an airplane and go see something fun. Went to Vancouver, I went to Kauai, Barcelona a few times, Berlin a few times, Zurich. I love that. So that's been fun for me. And Alex Rogers and the staff at ICBC, Noel and Jesse and Randy, they put on such a good conference. It has always been boutique-y and curated, in the beginning. And so it was a mix. It was not a festival style conference. It's a very, very buttoned up business conference. And the caliber of people, you have, the head of Europe for Dentons, and you have, the head of the cannabis czar of Germany, speaks, Burkhard Bleener, like he's bringing people that know what they're talking about. And so that's always refreshing. And then it's just a great conference. It's a great experience where the learning is good, the conference is put on, you just have a good experience. And as it's grown, the industry around it in Germany has grown. And I would give a nod to that conference, that a lot of the reason the German industry has grown as it has is that there has been a really wonderful place for all of the people involved to get together and talk about what's happening, what needs to be happening. And it's been very influential in the way that the European market as a whole has evolved. I would give that credit very openly to Alex and the ICBC for sure. This is going to be a big one. So it reminds me of, 2015. I was at 2015, 2016. I remember I went to it was 2015. I went to the MJ Biz at the Rio as just an attendee. 2016, I was working at Bang, and Bang threw the big party on the rooftop of the Rio the last year before it went to the convention center. And that year, cannabis had been legalized in a bunch of different states, medical, recreational, and something like 12,000 extra people showed up, and they were not anticipating that. It was oversold. There was a line at Starbucks all day long that was an hour long. I think they got fined actually because it was oversold so drastically, and they didn't want to turn people away, but at the same time it was like, oh my gosh, I'm expecting that's what's going to happen this year at ICBC, because when the Germans put their rules out and everyone now knows what the roadmap looks like, a lot of people were hanging in the shadows waiting to jump in until they knew kind of what to expect. Well, now we know. And I expect this to be a really, really big year. I'm excited. I can't wait to go. I'm like,
I mean, absolutely. And I totally agree with you, because I mean, for the last few months, everyone's eyes have been on Germany. It's kind of been this really kind of exciting thing to watch. And now everyone wants to be there and to feel that kind of energy that's happening. So I think there's, for an already very special conference and event, it's just going to skyrocket this year. Is there anything else? Of course, there's so much to be excited about. Is there anything anyone specifically you're looking forward to hearing? Anything that maybe you could give attendees who might not have attended ICBC before, something that they can kind of expect, if I can put it that way?
They can expect a high level of professionalism. They can expect the speakers to be well prepared. They can expect them to be experts in their field, from all areas of the supply chain. And there'll be governmental representatives, there'll be politicians, there will be bankers, there'll be businessmen, and the level of professionalism is really remarkable. And it'll be fun. There'll be smoking sessions outside, because whenever you have a cannabis industry event, that's what happens. And people are just relaxed. It's not a conference like any other conference.
And it's very well-rounded. I think that's the thing that really stood out to me. There's a lot of professionalism, but there's also a lot of fun. There's a lot of great networking, and everyone's just kind of coming together. You walk out of the Estral Hotel and there's just kind of a cloud of smoke, which is also very cool. And you have these really amazing conversations, and you get to build friendships as well, which I think is really something that's important in this industry. And I'm sure that you'll agree, because I think that's something that you do as well with the connections that you make.
Well, we have a WhatsApp chat called Conference Family that we developed a couple years ago. And last year when I spoke at ICBC, it was my birthday, and there were like 19 people that threw me a surprise party. It was pretty crazy. And that speaks to the fact that the conferences is so good that people don't miss. People will plan their family vacations around going to that. And the other piece of it is, because it's an international conference, the people that go are sort of that like-minded people that travel, that are comfortable being in international environments, who are comfortable doing cross-border deals. So there's just a level of sophistication that comes from that, for sure.
Absolutely.
It's very different than going, not bashing on any other conference, but if I go to a conference like, one in Oklahoma that's Oklahoma focused, you're going to get everybody who wants to talk about Oklahoma, and as they should, if that's where they're doing business. But you just have more of an international set in that ICBC, which, here's what I liken it to. I live in a red state. I'm clearly, I would say, tilt a little left leaning in my politics, and Montana is, banning drag queens from reading children's books, the priorities here. But every year we have a Planned Parenthood benefit, and then I'm like, oh, it's my people, and that's how I feel when I'm at ICBC. I'm like, oh, my people, here we are, my international crew. I love it.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head with that, because a lot of conferences are a little bit more, area specific, and which is fine and which is great as well. But it is nice to have that kind of international atmosphere, and I think that's what's really exciting. And you get to hear what's happening in all these different parts from people who are there doing things, they're working there, fighting for legislation there, so I really that's something that I definitely experience as well at ICBC. And can you share a kind of sneak peek of what you're going to be speaking on at your panel this year?
Yeah, the topic is how to build a brand that lasts. So definitely something that I've done, it's my wheelhouse. I'm very comfortable speaking on that topic. And then, it has to do with an international bent as well. So, how do you, I think in cannabis, the thing that people forget is that I can't manufacture a product in one place and then just ship it all over. Everywhere you operate, you have to have a separate manufacturing, separate distribution, separate everything. And it's really difficult to, in the example with Bang and chocolate, for example, if we had a milk chocolate bar in Canada and in Germany and in Michigan and in California and Nevada, how do we make sure it's the exact same experience, the exact same chocolate? And so developing SOPs around quality and consistency was something that I felt very strongly about, because I wanted the consumer, whether they were in any one of those locations, to have the exact same Bang bar. And that's definitely a piece of that puzzle that I'll be talking about.
And I think that's very important, because at the end of the day, the consumers who we're serving, and we want them to have a good experience and a consistent experience, especially with when it comes to cannabis products. So I think that's super important, and it is very different to kind of build and grow a brand in that space. So I think that's something that people can definitely learn from. So go check out Jamie's speech this year at ICBC. I'd love to talk a little bit about the future. And, of course, things are constantly changing, as we know, and it's very difficult to make predictions in this industry. But you've been in the space for a long time, and I'm sure there are certain trends that you can kind of pick up on. And I'm just curious to hear if you have any kind of predictions or even hopes for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years of the industry on a global scale.
What I'd love to say to you is that my crystal ball's in the shop, because it's almost pointless to make predictions, because nothing in cannabis ever happens the way you think it's going to or the way it should. Case in point, when the rules came out, the consumption lounge rules came out in Germany, everyone was kind of excited, and then they read and went, oh, it's not actually a consumption lounge, it's a grow co-op. It's a grow group. And there was like kind of a deflated, massive what? You never know what's going to happen. What I do believe is that pressure is mounting, and it's almost impossible it's impossible. We're never going to get the genie back in the bottle. Cannabis is here. So it's not a matter of if it will be federally legalized. It's a matter of when. And my recommendation to people is that it's coming at some point, and it's going to be another one of those huge shifts, whether it's descheduled or rescheduled or legalized or decriminalized federally, whatever happens. It would be smart for all involved to be parallel processing what happens, do what they got to do today, but what happens if, because things can change on a dime.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think that's something that, and everyone says that I'm not going to make any predictions because I'm going to end up looking back on this and being completely wrong. But how about for yourself, Jamie? You've done a lot in your life, and you've done a lot of amazing things, and you have so many fantastic achievements. What are some of the things you kind of look forward to in the coming years for yourself and for New Holland Group, in this new kind of chapter of your life?
Well, what's been kind of, I would say, the focus for me lately, I'm 54, and I'm thinking about the fact that, I'm caring for my parents are, in their 70s, late 70s. And I'm watching what's happening with them. And I mean, I hit the jackpot with my parents. They're so smart and cool and loving and kind and accepting and all of those things. So I've just had the greatest role models. But I'm watching things, mobility is being affected. And I think, well, okay, so if I'm going to be 74 in 20 years, that means I got really 20 good years left to go do all the things that I want to do while I'm still young enough and mobile enough to go do those things. So then I'm questioning the amount that I want to work or what kind of work I want to do. So the thoughts that are going through my head right now in this stage of my life are about the quality of my life. So what I want for myself is to continue waking up every day really excited to do what I do, to continue helping people, living a life of service, so to speak, because I do believe that that's where I get the most fulfillment. And, I'm really blessed, and, that attitude of gratitude has served me well. So I'm always looking for the things to be grateful for. So I want to continue down that path, helping others, being grateful, and thinking about what are, every year I want to do a couple cool things or get out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to just keep doing that.
I think that's great. I think that's really amazing, and I think that's so true. If we can all wake up every day and be grateful and excited for what lies ahead, then we've done something right, right? So I think that's
exactly.
That's a very important kind of I think, and that's a really great way for us to kind of, as we start to wrap things up here today, I think that's a good kind of words of wisdom to share with people. It's do what makes you happy and excited, because life is long, but life is also short. And as you mentioned before, time goes by so quickly. Before you know it, your life is over. So enjoy it while you can, right?
Exactly.
And Jamie, is there anything else you would like to add or share with? What I would actually love to ask you is, and because you've had a lot of great experiences and crazy experiences, what is the craziest story that you could share with us today, or from your tenure in the cannabis industry? I mean, there've got to be some interesting ones.
Oh, I have some. I mean, it would be hard to pick one. The one that comes to mind that I always think about is early in my days at Bang. One of the things that I did was I would go pick up cash, and then I would go deliver cash to vendors to pay for things like our packaging, because banking was difficult. And even though we had a bank account, oftentimes our customers didn't. So one time I had picked up a short stack of $50,000, and I was flying to deliver it to our packaging vendor, and had forgotten that, because I had a whirlwind trip. I was here for 2 days, here for 2 days, here for 2 days, da 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 da. And by the end, I was just living out of a suitcase and trying to pack everything. And I packed my suitcase, but I had that 50 grand in a manila envelope, and it was buried at the bottom of my suitcase, and I had forgotten about it. And just in a temporary lapse of judgment, I was like, I'm so tired of schlepping the suitcase. And I checked it in. And I walked to go through security, and I went, oh my God, I just checked $50,000 in. And I called my dad immediately. Dad, guess what I did? And he said, Jamie, he's like, first of all, there's nothing you can do about it now. He's like, take a deep breath. And what I want you to do is go watch the suitcases being loaded onto your plane. And if you see your suitcase, rest assured the money's still there, because they're not going to, if they know it's there, they're not going to just take the money. They're going to take your whole suitcase. And I said, okay. So then I'm at the window, and there's my suitcase. So I know it made it to my, my connection. And then I get to the next, and I'm at the window. It made it to the next, and it made it through. And I thought, I'll never do that again. I would say that is one. The other one is, one year I was at MJ Biz, and I was doing the Cypress project. And so Cypress did this really cool collectible skull jar with a childproof bucket hat. And I was at MJ Biz with a bunch of those to hand out as samples. Well, I had like 4 or 5 of them, and they were left, and they were like 1/4 ounce jars of weed. So I probably had 1 ounce of weed in my suitcase. Well, Muggs and I took our families to Mexico for Thanksgiving that year. And so I went straight from Vegas to Mexico and completely forgot that I had 1 ounce of weed in my suitcase. And so I took 1 ounce of weed to Mexico. And then, fortunately, pretty much anywhere around the world, you can give weed away and people are grateful. So
sure, yeah, I'm sure
I was careful not to bring it back into the US. Yeah. Oh, I have a million of those stories.
You could do a whole show on just, I think, the crazy stories and experiences that you've had. And thanks for sharing some of those with us today. I think that's a really great thing about this industry as well, is that there are so many great stories like this, and that's a big part of what makes the industry so special, right?
Yep, for sure.
So Jamie, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on. Is there anything you'd like to add, any final thoughts before we kind of wrap things up here today?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me, inviting me to come on to the show, letting me talk about all these things that I think are fun and interesting. And hopefully whoever sees this isn't bored out of their mind, but I just appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think anybody could be bored listening to you speak and the stories that you have to tell. Thank you, Jamie. I really do appreciate it. And thanks for being part of the CanMar Morning Talk Show.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good one.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching or listening to the CanMar Morning Talk Show. Join us next time for your weekly dose of cannabis and psychedelics updates from the industry's experts. But before you go, don't forget that at CanMar we specialize in recruitment and licensing and compliance for highly regulated industries such as cannabis, hemp, and psychedelics. Visit us at canmar.io to book a free consultation with one of our specialists today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button to hear more juicy insights from the movers and shakers of the cannabis and psychedelics industry.